Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you're having a fantastic Friday. Weather here along the Wasatch Front as we head into the Memorial Day holiday is about as good as it's been all year long. So looking forward to getting out in the sun and hitting the links, maybe a little golf. I don't know. We'll see what happens over the weekend, but hope you guys are all doing well on this Friday. All right, so the Bay Area for BYU is apparently a hotbed for recruiting for Kalani Sitake and the BYU football program. Now, earlier this week, and it kind of got buried under the avalanche of the other news involving BYU sports, is the commitment earlier this week of Sefanaia Alatini from St. Francis High School out there in Mountain View, California, which is a suburb of the Bay Area there. And I love what I see from Sefaniah Alatini. He's listed at either 6'2" or 6'3", $180 to $195, depending on which website you look at. But if you look at this kid's highlight reel, he looks the part of just an absolute hard-hitting defender. I love his skill set. He lists himself as a free safety, a wide receiver, and an athlete on his recruiting profile, and for good reason. But I watched his tape, and I said it I did a YouTube short shortly after he committed, and I pointed out that he screams to me like kind of the prototypical Jay Hill safety prospect, a big hitter, a guy who tracks the ball well in the air. Speaking of being a free safety, because it's a key part of the Jay Hill single high defense. What single high is, it's one safety. It's the free safety who is usually 15 to 20 yards off the ball, and their job, quite frankly, is to clean up the mess in front of them. The other 10 guys miss a mistake. That free safety's job is to go play cleanup. And that's what Alatini shows, that ability to be that cleanup man, but at the same time, make highlight reel plays. The other question I have is watching him is he likes to lay the lumber. He absolutely comes downhill and hammers folks. At 6'2", if he was like 6'3" or even 6'4", could he bulk up? Could his frame absorb, maybe getting to 220 pounds and being a linebacker in the mold of what BYU has done with an Ace Kafusi or, heck, even an Isaiah Glasker? That's the question I have as Alatini develops here, is could he ultimately end up playing in the front seven as an off-ball linebacker for BYU? It wouldn't be the first or last time that's ever happened. Guys grow into their frames at different rates. And yeah, he may be a safety now, but give him 2 or 3 years in a college weight room and have the growth plates, if they continue to grow, he could grow into being a linebacker. I love this pickup. He's a solid 86. Speaking of the recruiting rankings from 24/7 Sports, which those recruiting rankings are the ones I prefer. You may like On3 or Rivals. To each their own. I prefer 24/7 Sports. It stems from my time back in a previous stint working for Scout and 24/7, but his composite rating is not that far off, 85.44. I think this is a really, really fantastic pickup for BYU. And the more I have watched his tape, the way he plays, and quite frankly, looking at who else wanted this kid, Arizona, Boise State, Utah, like you go down the list of teams. Cal, his obviously a school right there in his backyard. Washington offered him at one point. He had a lot of other competing Power 4 offers alongside BYU, and it's a very solid recruiting win for BYU to get Alatini to commit. Now, the one thing I do wonder is he related to CJ Alatini, Chuck Alatini, who played at Orem High School. That part I haven't put together. Maybe a cousin, may have distant relations. I'll have to find out more on that as time goes on. But I really, really like what I see from Stephaniah Alatini. That brings me to the second topic here when it comes to the Bay Area, is we found out yesterday that Archbishop Riordan, which is one of the premier private high schools out there in the Bay Area or Northern California, well, they are sending Tommy Tofi, who is a 4-star prospect rated number 93 rating from 24/7 Sports. He has readjusted his final visits, or his official visits, the visits he'll make to these schools, and he has flipped the Miami Hurricanes for your BYU Cougars. And it also will be the final recruiting trip, the final official visit he makes this summer will be to BYU the weekend of June 20th. That weekend, by the way, I think it's like June 18th and change to June 22nd. Like, it's a protracted weekend, obviously, 5 days or so in there. I'm telling you, Ryder Lyons is supposed to be on campus. Tommy Tofi here is supposed to be on campus. There are no shortage of high-level prospects coming in for that specific weekend. It could be a bonanza for BYU if they can capitalize on that official visit. But the bigger point is, Tommy Tofi was a guy that, talking to some people who I had heard from, I had reached out and I saw his recruiting profile start to rise. I saw Utah was chasing him because he will visit Utah as well. He's also got plans to visit Tennessee, Oregon, and Cal. His brother signed at Cal last year. But Tommy Tofi, 6'6", 320 pounds, absolute bulldog of an offensive lineman. For him to flip a trip potentially from Miami to BYU screams that BYU has made up some significant ground in the recruiting of him. TJ Woods is proving that he is a really, really phenomenal recruiter. I think that what Kalani Sitake has done with his staff overall is he has brought in really, really high-level recruiters, and he just allows them to go chase the best talent they possibly can find. And Tommy Tofi, it pays off as he will make an official visit to BYU. Will BYU ultimately win this recruiting battle? That's TBD, because as I mentioned, he's making 5 visits, and he's going to see the who's who of college football: Tennessee, Oregon, Cal, Utah, and BYU. Yeah, no shortage of power for options for a kid like that there. But I love the fact that BYU made it some significant recruiting ground, as I understand it, to get Tommy Tofi first his attention, and then finally to garner an official visit where he's coming to Provo, Utah to see what BYU has to offer. I cannot reiterate more often than I probably should more often than I do. I should reiterate that now that BYU has a Power 4 label attached to their name, it has revolutionized things. There were a lot of young men, I should say, for the 12 years, or there was a 13 years, BYU was an independent. And I had conversations with multiple of them who said, hey, I love BYU, but I want to play Power 5 football. And BYU, simply put, is not a Power 5 program. And yes, BYU tried to combat that by saying, hey, we're Power 5 adjacent. We're playing as tough as a schedule as we can. Kids, they want that label. They want to be able to say, I played, it used to be Power 5, now it's Power 4 football. They want to play at the highest level of football possible. And now that BYU is in that group, it has really changed the calculus for BYU on the recruiting front. NIL plays a role, obviously, and BYU has got NIL cash that they can spend as well. But the bigger point you made here is Tommy Tofi was a guy that I had all but written off of BYU having any shot at bringing in. And all of a sudden it pops up. Brandon Huffman from 24/7 Sports writes a great story and says that Tommy Tofi decided he wanted to flip his official visit and he's going to visit BYU. And as he mentions here about the BYU deal, if I can find it, if I probably should have this pulled up a minute ago. Yeah, we made it official. We're replacing Miami with a BYU visit. And that was kind of crazy because Miami, much like BYU, kind of a force on the recruiting front. They have brought in a lot of high-level players. They have just, and they are unabashed in saying that, yeah, we're spending money in NIL, deal with it. That's kind of been their mentality on it. But he's a number 6 interior offensive lineman. He's number 90. He's a top 100 recruit nationally. And to get BYU to be his final recruiting visit, his official visit, that says something, because that's going to be the last impression he has before he ultimately decides where he's going to play. And that could really help BYU's chances of adding yet another premier talent to this 2026 class, which is shaping up to be one of the all-time classes, if not the all-time class for the BYU Cougars. All right, we'll finish up this edition of the podcast coming up next, as we always do on a Friday, with your questions. Our Locked On Cougars Insider Group, I throw it out. They respond in force, and we'll get to as many in the time remaining right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.